much you know about this and some of your reactions. I grew up in Northampton, Massachusetts. I'm a local resident, and when I was 18, I traveled to India when I was in college, actually, and really brought home to me the meaning of development and what is development and why is it so important for people to be able to access the world market. Because when we hear a lot about poverty, we hear about aid and how to help people. We don't realize that they have a lot of skills and abilities to produce. So fair trade for me, after India, I actually went to Central America and lived there and worked there for 2 years in human rights and social issues. And again, I saw even more clearly what is one of the major commodities in the world, coffee, is that people were producing and farming the land, yet they couldn't make a living. And why was this? And the aid, again, was helpful to a certain degree, but really the trade rules and regulations were what keeping people from being able to earn a decent or even basic living. So from those experiences, I became a believer in fair trade as soon as it became well known in the U.S. and have helped to promote it. Most recently, it's becoming more and more popular, so I started showing films around the area, talking to colleges and different groups that are interested in social justice issues. So I thought it would be nice to come here and see what you all know and to also share some more information with you. I think that film is a really great way to learn about these issues rather than just talking about them and to hear people's first-hand stories. So I brought 2 films. The first one we'll watch is about 16 minutes. It's called Buy or Be Fair. It's not the whole film. I'm going to have to shut it off at a certain point because we don't have a lot of time. I've been going to give you an idea of, at least in Mexico and in some other places, what fair trade is about and how the movement began and who's involved in it. And then it'll take me just a second to change it. I'm going to put on just 5 short minutes about children in Kenya, because one of the principles of fair trade is to stop child labor, which is a huge issue all over the world. So there's 2 minutes of documentary footage of children in Kenya talking about what it's like to work on a coffee farm and how fair trade is changing that for them. So I just wanted to do a little survey to figure out how much I actually need to talk and how much maybe you know. So if you could all close your eyes for a second, I'd like you to raise your hand if you've actually ever heard of fair trade before today. Oh my God, this is great. Okay, I didn't want anybody to feel intimidated to not raise their hand if you hadn't heard of it. So, fair trade is something that's on a label, but it's really a movement. And I just wanted to give you a few minutes introduction of what that label means. And it boils down to, I'll give you one of these when you leave. You can take it home, stick it on your fridge, stick it anywhere magnetic to see what the magnet, the symbol on the magnet is what you look for on actual products. So you can take one of those in case you're not familiar with the symbol. But beyond the symbol, what does fair trade mean? What does it support? Does anybody have any ideas before I go through?
It's that people are producing goods in other countries that we are paying rather low prices for and then selling them for extremely high prices here in the States.
Right.
Mostly. And it happens a lot in other countries as well.
So fair trade is a way to short circuit that.
Right.
Exactly. Any other ideas what the principles might be?
Well, it's just the idea that you should pay people a fair price for the goods they're producing.
Yes. Anyone else? Before I give you all the answers. Have people seen fair trade products, or do you buy them in your family or on your own?
Always. I mean, I don't drink coffee that isn't fair trade. I actually did a research paper on it last year.
Oh,
2 years ago. But I don't know, what I kind of feel from fair trade is kind of how the farmers in these countries aren't, getting their work's worth. They're working hard to support their family and they're not receiving what they should. They're getting gypped by these large corporations that are selling their products in the U.S. and in other countries for less than these farmers should be getting.
Exactly. Expert in the room. Anyone else? Okay. Well, you're all looking a little sleepy, so I didn't know when to give it to you. So, have you ever had fair trade chocolate? Would you like to have some fair trade chocolate? Let's move into the bill. Okay. Are there any vegans in the room? Anyone that doesn't eat dairy or allergic to dairy? Okay. One of these has dairy.
This has almonds.
This has almonds. This has dairy, so you can tell this is milk chocolate. The milk chocolate, you can take one and pass it on. If you don't want it, just keep passing it. The divine chocolate comes from Cocoa Cooperative in Ghana, and I've actually met some of the farmers from there. And the dark chocolate is from South America, so you can decide if you like better. And while we're passing that around, and if you eat it all, there's more when we change the film. So chocolate and coffee are two really readily available products that make a huge difference in people's lives. And I'll just go over 10 of the main tenets of fair trade. I'm not going to go into them in detail because the film will. The first is that you can use your consumer power to help others. It's very easy. You make a choice in this grocery store. Are you going to buy this or that? Are you going to go to that cafe or another? You can use your power, and your dollar will directly affect, as you're going to see in these films, other people's lives. The second is it supports education. Is that many farmers can't afford to even send their children to school because they can't afford to not have the labor of the child, and they can't afford, most countries have school fees, and if not school fees, you have to buy the books and the uniforms, and they just can't even afford that. They're barely eating. So fair trade helps to support keeping children in school. It empowers women. Many of these cooperatives have women leading them, and a lot of women do the work in them. So you're supporting women's rights and the women's ability to thrive around the world just by simply buying chocolate, coffee, bananas, tea, etc. It helps keep families together. Now, that sounds kind of strange. How could it keep a family together? Well, as you're going to see here, in Mexico, we hear a lot about Mexican migrants coming in to work in our country, and that's because they can't make any money in Mexico. Well, one of the reasons they can't make any money is because of the coffee crisis. So it keeps people from having to leave their land, having to leave their countries, and come to situations here which often are really very exploitive and just sad for them to be away from their homes and their communities. It supports community development because what cooperatives do with this money is they reinvest it in their communities. They decide what they need. So it's not like an AIDS program coming in and saying, you need clean water, you need a school. The community comes together and say, this is what we need, and this is how we're going to do it with our fair trade premiums we earn. It protects the environment, which you're going to see here. There's a great ecologist that's going to speak in the film. It promotes democracy. Often when people are not working in cooperative environments, they are working under plantation rules and under corporations, and there's no democracy whatsoever. There's no unionizing. You have no voice, and you can be very easily and most often exploited as a farm worker or a farmer. It promotes a long-term solution. As I was saying, the motto of the fair trade movement is trade, not aid. People ultimately want to work, they want to be able to support themselves, and they want to be an active part of developing their countries and their communities. It prevents illegal drug crops. Again, that sounds strange. How could it prevent drug crops? Well, because when you can't sell coffee for a decent price, you're gonna grow something you can sell. So people do grow drugs all over the world instead of coffee or other things they used to sell in the market. And lastly, it promotes economic stability and food security by allowing people to build up their own economies rather than being dependent on outside sources. So enough talking. I'm a big believer in film, and I hope that these give you a glimpse of what fair trade's about. And I'd ask you, we'll have a little time afterwards, hopefully, to discuss what you've seen. So I ask you to think of one thing that affects you or reaches you when you're watching these films, so that we have something to talk about afterwards.